It's 19 hours.
Yeah. So hello and welcome to this inaugural edition of Transformational Thursdays. And Thursdays for Transformation हमारी भारतीय परंपरा में इसको गुरुवार कहते हैं. And all the auspicious works regarding thought tinkering is all invoked on this day of the Lord Vishnu, the day of Guruvar. So today we are starting a very interesting interaction, and the genesis of it was 4 years back in 2017, when the concept paper of 5THIRTA, the fifth industrial revolution, was released, was launched by the Honorable 13th Prime Minister of the Republic of India, Bharat Ratna Pranab Mukherjee sir. We at Rethink India had got the great privilege to honor him before he was bestowed upon Bharat Ratna. We honored him from that august platform of Fifth Estate as the education president of India. So all through his presidential journey from 2012 to 2017, President Pranab was devoted to ignite the genius of the Indian mind and especially the higher education out there. And it was on that very auspicious occasion when 108 vice chancellors, the edu leaders across the nook and cranny of the country were also felicitated in the presence of Honorable Pranab Da, as we lovingly call him. So the architect, I would say the drashta of this entire concept of 5THIRTA, we have got Mr. Aurobindo Saxena. हम महर्षि औरबिंदो की 150वीं जन्म जयंती मना रहे हैं, और उन्हीं के नाम पर हमारे औरबिंदो सक्सेना जी, he came out with a very fabulous idea, and he said that, see, look, the word is talking about the fourth industrial revolution. सारी जड़ शक्तियों का convergence, they are all talking about. But if we just look at the next pedestal of it, and if we just say that there is a lot of VUCA in this fourth industrial revolution, and volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So he came and we worked together, and we just quickly created a kind of a concept paper. We'll be presenting it out here. So this Transformational Thursday, this series somewhere explores, as you can see on the screen as well, that we want to intersperse the integral Indic paradigm to the futuristic frontiers of various economic sectors, social sectors, and a host of other sectors out there. बात यह है कि ब्रिटिश दास्ता के बाद भी भारत आज भी उन्हीं पाश्चात्य अधिष्ठानों पर आगे बढ़ रहा है. But as Aurobindo sir, as we lovingly call him, he asserts very unequivocally that India had its own innate genius, and somehow or the other it's a time when we can reintroduce those very subtle Indic paradigms into whatever way the modern world is working. There is no challenge over there, but just we have to go deep into our past. We have to look differently, and we have to really re-engineer whatever is going on in the current flow. And we can just invoke upon the integral humanism, the integral Indic paradigm in some way or the other. So it's quite an open-ended perspective, and we have invited the entire research and development fraternity across the Indian establishment, the CSIR, the ISRO, the DRDO, the frontier research organizations, along with the higher academic institutions, because they will be the consumers of this discourse. And the idea is to have an icon of industry who shares the similar ideas as to how, with the creative intervention, the creative Indic intervention, how we can re-engineer and how we can bring 5THIRTA, as Aurobindo sir would explain in further details, because if you can see that 5 looks like an S, and 5THIR, the fifth industrial revolution, if acronymized, it looks like sthir, and sthirta, the stability. So that is what we all yearn for. So how this, in the VUCA word, sthirta can be brought about by invoking the Indic paradigm. This will be the subject matter for these 30 to 45 minutes every Thursday. So over to Aurobindo sir with this lovely presentation he has brought about, and really thanks to him for really taking the daring of all his elaborate thinking processes, that we can really come together and make that abstract Indic aspects into something very substantive, and we can really usher into an Indic era. जो आत्मनिर्भर भारत की बात है, तो आत्मनिर्भरता केवल इकोनॉमिक फ्रंटियर्स पे नहीं, इट ऑल स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम द माइंड. इट्स प्रोबेबली एन एरा ऑफ इंडियन रेनेसा, कि हम भारत के मूल अधिष्ठानों में जाएं और वहां से खोज कर उनको जोड़ें. So maybe that pedestal we will all start with. So over to Aurobindo sir to invoke this inaugural session of 5THIRTA Industry 5.0, which we lovingly call as India's Industrial Revolution, which has stability embedded over there. Aurobindo sir.
Thank you, Raghav, and thank you, Dr. Surbi, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. And warm welcome to all the listeners and viewers and participants of this webinar. From wherever you are joining, very good evening to everyone. So, before I start, I think it's important to just mention that this entire concept was created in 2017. It's been already, it's already 4 years since this concept came into the being. So, Raghav, if we could move to the next slide. So, before starting, at the outset, let me just talk about what are some of the major industrial revolutions which have happened in the last 300 years. The first one happened around 1730, which was called Industry 4.0, which was basically about the invention of steam engines. And after almost 105 years, the second industrial revolution happened, which was around 1870. And that was all about electrification. And then it took another 99 years for the third industrial revolution to happen, what we call as Industry 3.0. And it was all about computers, internet, digitization. And very, very recently, almost 5 years back in 2016, the World Economic Forum announced that we are in the midst of fourth industrial revolution, which will be all about robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, Internet of Things, 3D printing, and all. And while World Economic Forum started talking about Industry 4.0, in 2017, we thought that what will be the next step in this particular journey, and we came up with this idea of Industry 5.0, which we famously called as STHIRTA, or India's Industrial Revolution. And one thing which is very interesting to note here is that the difference between two subsequent industrial revolutions has been reducing. So from 105 years to 99 years, and then finally to 47 years. We believe that the fifth industrial revolution could also coincide with India's 100th year or 100th anniversary of independence, which will be in 2047. So what will this Industry 5.0 be all about, and what have been some of the highlights of the last four industrial revolutions is what we are going to discuss in this today's session. So, before we talk more about 5.0, Industry 5.0 and STHIRTA, it is important to understand that no industrial revolution happens in a year. Every industrial revolution has taken at least 30 to 40 years to fructify. And as I mentioned, that the time gap between two subsequent industrial revolutions is continuously reducing. And one thing which has been common across all the industrial revolutions is that the technology continues to keep advancing, right? Unfortunately, India, has been a laggard, and we have already missed out on leading the last four industrial revolutions. But here is an opportunity for us that if the fifth industrial revolution is going to happen in next 30 years, then we have clearly next 3 decades to prepare for it, to lead it, and to lead it in our own different way, right? Now, why India has not been able to lead the last four industrial revolutions, and why other countries have led it, I think one of the main reasons which I could comprehend is that most of these developed countries have invested a lot in R&D, in terms of innovating business processes, in terms of creating innovative products. And if you see the last 1500 years, what all innovations have changed the world, whether it is ship or wheel or paper or the concept of zero or microscope or telephone, most of these innovations, these inventions have come from the West. And even if you look at what are the disruptions which are on the anvil, whether it is about electric clothing or liquid computers or bionic eyes, all these innovations are again happening in the West. And this is probably the reason why India has missed out on the last four industrial revolution. today everyone wants to talk about China, but we have to also at the same point of time understand that China has become world's factory because they started planning for it almost 3 to 4 decades back. Now, like Raghav mentioned, fourth industrial revolution in many which ways has amplified this term, which has its origins in the defense or the military segment, right? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And in the last few years, we are seeing so much of usage of this term even in the education parlance and in educational discourse. So why is this happening? Why are we witnessing VUCA? And like I mentioned in my previous slides also, that most of the innovations have come from the developed countries, not from developing countries like India. And these countries, fundamentally, they are facing a problem which everyone knows about, aging of their working age population and aging of their entire population. And that is why the focus for them, the challenges to be solved for them is to automate the process, to make sure that if there are not enough people to take care of a particular task, then machines can take over and machines can actually replace humans because they don't have a workforce, right? Unfortunately, India has been adopting most of these technologies without contextualizing it to our needs. And this is one reason why we see that there is so much of unemployment, and there are so much of challenges which we are facing because of increasing VUCA. Raghav, any thoughts on this? I don't want to
No,
go
I
on and
think
on,
it's
but
yeah, it's very crystal clear, and you have really mentioned the crux of it all the woes and challenges. In fact, today happens to be the World Youth Skills Day, which was started by the United Nations in the year 2014, and Prime Minister had an early morning address, and he talked about that because the demographic dividend which we enjoy, he talked about reskilling up and upskilling over there. So I think this is quite a top level policy perspective which needs to be pushed across, that we are adopting just without contextualizing these technologies to our needs. I think this is the core of it all. And more when you will be elaborating, and the whole purpose behind this whole engagement is what got launched from those auspices of the Fifth Estate Summit 2017. We lost time and all, so we can start advocating and try to put it forth, and centers for fifth industrial revolution, as you have said, and you will be elaborating upon, we can really have a rethink on our technological adoption. It's fine to take it, but in whatever context, whatever frontiers we have to. So it's lovely, sir.
I think the human aspect of contextualizing technology adoption to the needs of the society is very important point which you have put
yes,
forth.
and that will be very critical to the vision of Atmanirbharta, because it cannot be just a emotional sentimentalism or superficial chatter. Something really substantive has to come, and this is what I feel that I think sir would be expanding it further in the presentation.
yeah. See, fundamentally, I'm not against technology. I'm not saying let's not use 5G mobile phones and let's go back to 2G, right? I am not against it.
Yes,
But the entire idea here is that let's also contextualize it rather than blindly adopting the next technological frontiers, right?
Yes.
So, like Raghav mentioned, that if you see the acronym of Fifth Industrial Revolution, and if you read 5 as S, then it becomes THIR. And India, will have to think really very smartly and intelligently, and as they say, out of the box, to really overcome some of the fundamental challenges that we face as a country. In terms of resources, in terms of quality of manpower, in terms of our political and otherwise financial challenges to some extent, right? So we are just 3 decades away. I think the next, after 3 decades, probably the world will look very different. Probably there will be super computers running different households chores. The quantum of disruption in the next 30 years will be equivalent to probably what we have seen in the last 100 years. I think, just to give the context, and I don't think any consultant in the world today can even dare to imagine how the world will look after 3 decades from now. And at the same point of time, when technologies grow and technologies start overcoming the human capabilities, there will always be moral and ethical dilemmas, whether to use a machine or a human brain to do a particular task. And factories have already started automating their assembly lines. So already we are seeing some of these moral and ethical dilemmas, whether it in terms of manufacturing or in terms of genetics. The list is long, right? So moving to the next slide, we have to really see what are going to be some of the key highlights of this fifth industrial revolution. As we mentioned earlier also, like artificial intelligence will transform into artificial super intelligence, but at the same point of time, if we want to lead it, we'll have to bring in India's civilizational wisdom and not simply copy paste technologies from the West, contextualize it, lead it from the front. We are already seeing machines starting to make refined machines. So it's not humans making machines, but machines have now already started making more and more machines, right? And we'll have to really create a framework to control it. And as I mentioned earlier, overcoming of moral dilemmas and ethics is going to play a very, very important role in the next 3 decades. There will be massive technological disruptions which we cannot even dare to imagine at this point of time. So, like I mentioned, being a developing country, we will have several challenges that we will have to address. And I have identified 15 major areas where I think we'll have to think really out of the box and create solutions which are based on our civilizational wisdom as well as the new technologies which are coming to the fore, and solve these problems in terms of education. And when I say education, it also encompasses skill development, reskilling, disaster management, energy, food, overall governance, healthcare, society, housing, environment management, sanitation management, defense and security, space technology, transportation, waste management, and most importantly, water management. And again, for our viewers, it's important to for you to note that we had identified these major deficits in 2017, and post COVID, you have seen how the healthcare system has crumbled. And I'm sure if things would have been more proactively addressed, then maybe things would have been different.
In fact, COVID has substantiated the concerns and from where this 5THIRTA was coming across. And that's why we were forced to reinitiate the whole narrative which was launched in 2017. And in COVID, all the concerns which were talked from those frontiers, they have really become evident, as Sir has said very nicely. And 1.5 years and the third wave, we are just sitting on the start of it all. So probably this is really the time to really rethink and start re-engineering our priorities moving forward. So,
see, most of these 15 areas have a time bomb ticking. So, you pick up any particular area like water management. There are tons and tons of research articles in public domain which says so many cities in India are likely to run out of water. And like COVID was the bomb for healthcare segment, I'm sure there are different time bombs waiting in each one of these categories. And if we are not proactive, then we'll know, we'll come to know of these bombs only when they hit us. So I think in the next few webinars and discussions, we'll pick up each of these topics and deep dive into them.
Yes. That's the plan. And this was the concept paper which we presented just to, and we had the fortune of having Professor Kapil Kapoor, who is currently the chairperson of the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies. He got elevated to that prime position, and it's probably from that frontiers, and he has been a votary of India's intellectual traditions. And it was in that spirit we framed out this entire concept paper, presented it in the presence of President Pranab Mukherjee sir, who had just moved out from Rashtrapati Bhavan just in July. The ceremony was in December. It was in his August presence. and we had a vast, I would say, forum of dignitaries from across the country. So for the last 300 years, if we see, the world has made unprecedented progress in material development, ending up controlling the elements from mechanical means to that of electrical ones to electronics to now the prevalent age of convergence of information, popularly ascribed to as the fourth industrial revolution. Sir has mentioned the whole progression of it all and how the newer revolutions are taking a lesser time to go over there, and the whole one percenter syndrome in the economic frontier, it just comes together over there because the controlling stakes are coming. That's how the control is working across the world. So though the human race has progressed immensely in terms of material development in the last 300 years, it has been subjected to epochs of terrific turmoil, ranging from colonial imperialism via drain of sovereign national wealth, leading to abject poverty, world wars, environmental degradation, financial meltdowns, etc., etc., etc. And this COVID outbreak is just the epitome of all these disruptions. And these are all negative disruptions. Disruptions are both positive for the human race and disrupt and negative over there. So all this is happening, and material prosperity, the so-called material prosperity, and to us and to a handful of people, the inequity is rising like anything. So we have to put multiple yardsticks parallelly together with to be able to make sense of what we are talking here. So it has come at the cost of losing mental peace, social stability, and human values to a great extent. Even the one percenters, they are not enjoying that stability. Their personal family lives are getting disrupted. We know the billionaires are going for separations after decades of marital lives. I will not name over here, but then all this has a cost, because prosperity or all these things has to be comprehensive in nature, and that is the integral Indic view we wanted to introduce as a part of the Sthir narrative. So we are currently, and this was to 2017, and 4 years hence almost, so we are at the cusp of a new era whereby technological control over the elements would be almost absolute, and the directions of its deployment would define the future fate of humanity as a whole. Like artificial intelligence is a big, I would say it's a big boon, but as Sir said, this is a classic moral and ethical dilemma, that how the sovereign nation states would be deploying artificial intelligence, the direction of its deployment by smart regulations. For example, in today's news, RBI has put a restriction on one of the global credit cards that until unless you put up your data servers in the sovereign territory of India, you won't be allowed to have newer cards, something like that. So a lot of challenges on these frontiers are coming, the information exchange. And now here, with all the technological prowess with us, and going back to our own pantheon, like always there was a discretion ki bhai yantra shakti ka jo upayog hai, because in India we always had three segments of powers, the mantra shakti, the tantra shakti, and the yantra shakti. And there is a whole treatise, there is a whole knowledge, traditions and practices in India which talks elaborately about it. When Arjun had burned the Dandakaranya forest, Takshak was burning over there, and he said, I will give you the yantra vidya. So Krishna said, don't take the yantra vidya as of now, it is for the Kali Yuga. So it comes from our pantheon, our folklore. So as a nation, we are quite attuned to these phenomenal developments. Ravana, for that matter, had, at least in the mythological perspective, had all the technological prowess with him. But his intent to control all the three words was probably one of the reasons for his own debacle and downgrade and all kind of turmoil which was created at that point in time. So as Aurobindo sir said, that we have to culminate it all together. The civilizational wisdom of India really comes at the yoga, the International Yoga Day. The yoga is not just some hatasan or whatever. Yoga is a communion, a synthesis of a host of parameters. And we at Rethink India are very strongly put across the integral compact. In India, the Purusharthas have been four: Dharma, Artha, and Kama, and Moksha. And there is a very beautiful interrelation, the functionality over there. We'll come to it later on. And that's something which can be a fine barometer, a fine function for inducing stability, that all my desires have to be somehow dharma anchored, and they should be centered towards moksha. And then that the accomplishment of that kamana, that desire, in that restrictions, I would be acquiring Artha. So that is something which we intend to profess and propound further. And this is where the antiquated civilization of the word India, Bharata, which entered into an age of material regression post the colossal annihilation resulted out of the Mahabharata war. Now, this is historical. A lot of evidences are coming through with astrological, with archaeological finds and all kind of linkages which are coming across. So, which is presumed to be at the epitome of material scientific progress dated at least 3,000 years ago, comes into prominence. At least the narrative over there कि ब्रह्मास्त्र से सारी सृष्टि ही खत्म हो जाएगी. So it was long back before the nuclear arsenal came into being, the hydrogen bombs of the Second World War. It was much earlier. In fact, it predates the date of Genesis, of the biblical Genesis, somehow or the other. So that was, Mahabharata is considered to be the biggest war which annihilated the whole civilization across. So that is a kind of a time frame we want to pose it. Now, the questions we ask from this August forum, the fifth state forum, the 5THIRTA forum: can India offer its civilizational wisdom and intellectual traditions to steer through the contemporary material advances to lead the world towards a stable epoch of lasting peace and prosperity? So, like we added the arts part into STEM narrative, STEAM bana diya humne usko, to steam the human civilization further. So can we add upon the fourth industrial revolution, all the beautiful advances of it, of which we are quite an example कि we can communicate. ये तो विद्या संजय और वेदव्यास के पास ही थी दिव्य दृष्टि की, but now each and every person out here has the divya drishti of a Zoom or a host of other parameters, platforms for that matter. But how to balance it across? Now, this is quite how the yoga can happen between the material progress and the mental peace. So these are some of the questions we are trying to pose it as a part of this discourse, where we will be having icons of industry, academia, and a host of other thinkers coming into the fray. Now, can the characteristic Indian thought on the philosophical foundations of human existence, social order, education, economy, polity, governance, administration, management, environment, development, they can come to a need. For example, on the World Environment Day, Rethink India convened the Environmental Forum, and where we said that environmentalism, the Indic environmentalism, and we chose the mascot, the lovely mascot of the little Krishna, that how he purified the elements of nature. So in India, the thought had always been to be in communion with nature. Sustainability was somewhere in our philosophical foundation. So can we take out those abstract mantras and those aspects and elaborate them into kind of research papers, thought papers, white papers, and can our national policy can be somehow influenced under the facet of all those lovely civilizational foundations. Over here, I would like to just stop and say that even the top-notch schools of the world, like the Harvard University or the best thinkers across, they draw a lot of inspiration from their own Western civilizations. The names, the brands, the monikers, the precepts, they all accrue from there. Somehow the other, our Indian intelligentsia, it is too dependent on the Western thought alone, and they consider it to be the epitome of it all. But somehow we have to dare and come out, and as Professor Kapil Kapoor and the whole, I would say a whole group of such savants are saying that we have to go deep within. For example, the oral traditions of India. And there is a beautiful paper which says that the transmission of knowledge through the oral traditions is faster and it is more effective than even the written traditions. So can we really set out small centers which do research, which really work around these Indic paradigms and build upon it? We ask the further questions, can the Indian techno-managerial paradigms concerning food, healthcare. Now, I have with me Dr. Surbhi Vash, and on the International Yoga Day, we had the Healing Forum. We used the term healing and we said preventive and integrative feeling, and the whole universe of Amazonians, the doyens of healthcare and Professor Y.K. Gupta over there, who is the head of the pharmacology establishment over there, he said that there is no need to go to the molecular level for every drug. If we can go up to certain smaller levels, and if we can find an experiential evidence out of it, there is no need to go into that very, very strong molecular level findings over there. Because somehow the other, the integration of allopathy with Ayush, Ayurveda, Unani, yoga, homeopathy, all those traditional medicinal systems, can we really start exploring and really finding out our own framework of clinical trials so that it is safe for the human body. We don't want quacks, but at the same time, whatever grand heritage we have, can we find out frameworks for a judicious synthesis? Now, these, for example, in the healthcare space, what Dr. Surbi practices is like ahar, vihar, vichar, and aushadhi is just the smallest component of it all. So, can we really work around it? Then the Indic paradigms around water. I remember my own dadi who used to say there was a civilizational aspect ki lalla पानी ज्यादा मत बहाए, जाको हिसाब देना पड़ेगा. तो पुनर्जन्म और परलोक की जो भावना है, उससे ये vast civilization. I come from a land, Braj, the land of Krishna, where the annual rainfall is just 60 centimeters, and that's why we have a vast grid of 1,000 odd traditional water bodies. And the savant Anupam Mishra Sahab from Gandhi Peace Foundation has published a book, Aaj Bhi Khare Hain Talab, and they documented that 6 lakh villages of India, the 6 lakh habitations, has close to 11 lakh these traditional water bodies. And I tell you, because I have worked personally in that region, that this is a localized water grid. Around the hill of Govardhan, you have 44 water tanks. And if these water tanks are filled to their zenith, 7,000 of this grid will fill up the Tehri Dam. So do we really want to go to massive ecological disasters like these bigger dams? Or can we work around with these smaller localized grids? Because in India, rainfall happens in the monsoon season, which we are all witnessing today. And even in those 4 months, rainfall just comes in 100 hours. The downpour is just 100 hours. So can we really structure our developmental policy? Nal se Jal is a great idea. But what about the water effluent coming out of it and degrading our traditional water grid? Now, can we really create a village development plan whereby the water effluent goes to the lowest to the most dirty part? So these are some of the questions which, out of this, is 5THIRTA. Can we create sustainability? Is again a Western concept, but is 5THIRTA is the more Indic one. Can we really learn from our ancient design? We were a prosperous civilization. Sanitation, for that matter, waste management, for that matter, housing, defense. Now in housing, IIT Kanpur has beautiful examples when Arun Shauri Sahab devoted his entire MP-led funds to a green building. Now in India, all our jazzy buildings have to be created like the European style. Our temperatures never go down to that level. And in air conditioning them, we really create a lot of electrical power over there. So these are some of the areas in terms of security, in terms of energy, in terms of space, transport. Can we present an additional leeway to the ongoing discourse rather than, as Aurobindo sir said very, very emphatically, without contextualizing the Western use cases, we are just copying and just thopifying it on us all in the name of development, in the name of progress, in the name of marching ahead, because this needs terrific work. Copy and paste is the easiest part of the fulcrum of the bureaucracy of whatever order is out here. Copy and paste. But yeah,
I think we need to value our Indic wisdom, somewhere in all these sectors: food, healthcare, waterways, sanitation, housing, defense, security. We have such huge repertoire of knowledge and wisdom, and this needs to be applied. Why does it have to happen that anything when it comes to the West is valued by India or the world? So Vishwa Jagat Guru to India has been. So I think this is very important.
I would like to give another example, like the doyen of management sciences, C.K. Prahlad Sahab. He came out with the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid paradigm. Now just see the implication of it. He talked very beautifully, and somewhere or the other, his entire theory had the germs of the Indic paradigm. But the way it was extrapolated upon, it got into products and services. It just could not get into sovereign governance policies. So somewhere or the other, at that finer level, I think the Indic thought we were the rishis, we were the Jagat Gurus. So somewhere or the other, we have to create a framework. So that's why we ask the question next: can India lead this impending? Because this is impending. There is no driving force as such. We are somehow, even our current direction of development is too westernized in its own design. We are copying the Western paradigm blindly and without contextualizing. This impending fifth industrial revolution, when we really touch upon our 100 years of independence, so independence in the quotes, independence in all fashions, and which would be stable, universal, and all encompassing. What can be the worst factor that 80 crore people in this lockdown have to be fed by the state, by the FCI godowns. We have not been able to create our own structure, because technology has given us the power. As Aurobindo sir said, we are not against technology. But how to use technology? What are the use cases? What are the designs of it all? Because technology, when it came, it could democratize the economy like anything. But the way technology is being deployed with the power of the big finance, and our regulatory space is just getting knocked off over and over again. So it is again the one percenter syndrome is growing across, and that is really a cause of concern, and that cause is for instability. And this entire narrative is for the fifth estate. At Rethink India parlance, we say that judiciary, bureaucracy, or the legislature, or media for that matter, they are the formal estates. But academia, where all knowledge germinates, where all kind of deliberations, the freedom of speech, the freedom of debate, the freedom of dissent happens. Can the fifth estate of India galvanize itself enough to take up the leadership of this emerging narrative of India's industrial revolution? That is what we posit, and over to Aurobindo sir to conclude this session. Yeah.
So now last two slides left, and I mean the big question is, everyone will have this doubt whether India can lead fifth industrial revolution. It is, or is it too Herculean a task for us to challenge, to address, right? Now, how can India lead the fifth industrial revolution? I think we'll have to all be individual contributors first. Sthirta has to first reside within us at an individual level. And there is a framework which I have created. So the alignment of brain and heart is very important at an individual level. Now, when we say brain always thinks about what is the purpose in life, what I want to achieve. I want to become a billionaire, and what is the process, the vertical part of it. The heart always thinks about pride and passion, which is the horizontal part of it. So there has to be sthirta, there has to be a balance, there has to be an equilibrium between what the brain is thinking and the heart is feeling. And at that particular alignment, a person has to find himself at peace, at stability, to become an independent contributor to his society, and then that society to become a contributor to the nation. So the next slide, if you see, what I'm trying to say is that first of all, a person has to be stable. He has to be sthir within himself, right? And if he is not sthir, then like Raghav mentioned, even billionaires are getting into trouble managing their personal lives, right? So once you are stable within your head, only then you can make your organization, whichever organization you're working for, whosoever you are addressing. So if you're working in the fifth estate or education domain, then your consumers are your students. So if you are not there, if you are not stable, how can you make your students there? And if the institutions are not stable, then how can India become stable? So there has to be an alignment of India's why with institutions why, with individuals why. And when all these three are aligned, when people think beyond material gains and think of contributing to the nation, I think that is where that is what India will have a fair chance of actually leading the fifth industrial revolution.
I think sir has mentioned a very, very philosophical and a very, very powerful precept. And thanks to COVID, I would put thanks, despite the drudgery what COVID-19 pandemic has brought about. Sir said that going beyond the material, when people were infected with COVID, there was no refuge. Whatever material possessions they had acquired, there was nothing at their disposal. And Dr. Surbi would just tell more that people who are jijivisha, people who had a sattvic willpower, somewhere or the other in our civilizational narrative, when our dadis and nanis and even mothers and fathers say ki beta jada mat teji se bhag, have the balance of things, in the parampara things are there. So maybe it's a time for us to really present it in a more modern fashion, in the fashion of those formal papers, with data, with this and that, because anecdotal evidences, people generally, the kind of rational minds we have got over there. So I think this is a fabulous kickstart, head start, like this head start we had on 11th of December 2017. And today we are sitting on 15th of July 2021, and it's a transformational Thursday. So as Aurobindo sir said that how we want to take it forward, is basically we would be having deliberations. We would be inviting the fifth estate leaders from across on each of these areas and try to have further elaborations upon top of it. For example, under education, when we were interviewing Professor S.S. Mantha, of the former chairperson of the AICTE, and he had a beautiful slide on the pedagogical interventions which Shankaracharya adopted. Now, can that single slide, we might be inviting Professor Mantha to elaborate upon it, and probably that can become a part of our NEP deployment, because see, nothing can happen in just one go. We have to really bring about, and as the central facet, as Sir said, that individual is sthirta and institutional is sthirta, and then the national is sthirta. So COVID has disrupted it all. We have to really join hands, and those whose heart and head are aligned for a truly Divya and Bhavya Bharat, and beyond the emotional aspects of it, not just superficial chatter alone, but something substantive. Like, for example, I give you an example, the Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham campus in Coimbatore, right from the very start, they were very conscious about water. So they created the whole institution in such a fashion that not even a single drop of rainwater gets wasted. They conserve each and every drop of it, and then they recycle the waters over there. So Government of India had done a beautiful Swachhata Awards for the campuses. So modernity, we are not against that, but can we really invoke our own civilizational elements of conservation, and some of the very philosophical precepts somehow, which we have, the yoga, it can extend from, what is yoga? Atma or Paramatma ka yoga hi vastavik yoga hai. That is what our yogis have said. So then we have to really go beyond that. What is beyond this human life? We all have a finite expiry date. So have we really thought on the academic frontiers, what beyond are getting buried or burnt or whatever, where are we going? So this was the natural quest which the Indics had, and that's how we created such a glorious civilization, and as I said, which got annihilated in the war of Mahabharata. At least that is what the evidences say. So closing words to Aurobindo sir. This is how we plan to proceed, sir.
So thank you so much, Raghav. I think I look forward to participating in the future course of events and discussions on each of these problem statements. And I think really look forward. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my views and thoughts with you.
Thank you, sir. So we close over here. Dr. Surbi, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have had a wonderful session, and this has been a great